Hey adventurers, so today is going to be another Rings of Power video. This one, I don't have a reaction video to do because quite frankly, I already watched the video that I would have been reacting to. There's actually two videos that were released yesterday and today. One of them is called the Stories from the Legendarium Featurette, and I'll talk a little bit about that one, but then the other one is one that I haven't been able to find anywhere else yet. I've only been able to find the short video on Instagram. I'm sure it's on Twitter, but I don't have Twitter, so I don't have that. But anyways, so it's just this short video where they go through some things, where they talk about a little bit about some of the one on Instagram, the short one, there's really not a whole lot to it. There's not a whole lot of new footage. You really don't get a whole lot out of it. It's really just another bland featurette that doesn't really tell you anything. It's super short. It's only like 30 seconds or something. So I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on that one. It doesn't really tell me much. But this other one, Stories from the Legendarium Featurette, so there's a little bit of stuff in that one. Not really much new footage. There's a couple of shots that we haven't seen before, or that are around other scenes that we've seen before, but not really a whole lot. I guess I can put them in there as I find them. I'll just be doing screenshots. But so we've got just a landscape one where it's a little bit, seems a little like possibly quite CGI'd in the background, but the foreground looks really nice. I don't even know that the back of it is anything is CGI'd. It just looks kind of off to me. But then it goes in and talks about how the Second Age is the great untold story of Tolkien's Legendarium, and that's what they felt the story that they should be telling was. And I agree with that. The Second Age, specifically the story of the Rings of Power, the forging of the 20 rings essentially is what it is, 19 and then the one ring. The forging of those rings and what that leads to, the last alliance of elves and men, everything, that stuff is all such an important scene. We've technically seen parts of the last alliance of elves and men in the prologue for the Lord of the Rings movies, and that's great. But still, this story is one that is really a great story to be telling for, because it has the most relevance to the Lord of the Rings. It directly ties into the Lord of the Rings, and I mean the 9 rings go to the humans, which then become the Nazgul. The 3 rings go to the elves and are kept by Elrond and Galadriel, and before Gandalf comes to Middle Earth, it's kept by Círdan the shipwright, but then given to Gandalf because Círdan sees that it'll be of more use in Gandalf's hand. So that tale plus the dwarves getting them, the 7 dwarven rings don't really play much of a role in the Lord of the Rings. They do a little bit. It's talked about a little bit, but it's not a massive role that they're playing. Whereas the 9 rings, the 3 rings, and the 1 ring all play quite a large role. So seeing that story being told, that's a very good story in my opinion. The fall of Númenor and the rise of Elendil and the realms of Arnor and Gondor and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in there that really makes a lot of sense to be telling in this story that leads up to the events of the Lord of the Rings really very directly. The proto-hobbits, that doesn't make sense, but either way, they're absolutely right with what they're saying of this is the story that we felt we needed to be telling. You hear Morfydd Clark talking about Galadriel and how she's been on a journey for over 1,000 years of trying to find this very real evil that still exists, which obviously we know to be Sauron. I'll get to more of that in a second, because there's another shot, if I can find it. There's a shot with her looking down at a man, on a dead elf, presumably laying down dead. They're waiting at a funeral type scene. And that shot, my first thought was, oh, this is probably her brother or something, specifically because I can see that he's holding the knife that is an image of the 2 trees smashed together, which we then later see through the rest of the promotional stuff that's been released so far. We've seen Galadriel carrying and wielding, and I don't exactly know if that's going to be her brother, because there have been reports that her husband which is Celeborn. Yes, Celeborn is dead in this series, which doesn't really make sense. But it's possible that maybe that image is not her brother, but instead Celeborn, who has died, and somehow he's going to be brought back to life. I don't understand how, but whatever, because I mean, there have been some elves that have been brought back to life, but it's very rare occasion, very specific circumstances. I doubt that that's not what should be happening in this. So it could still be her brother, but the reason, so like I'm conflicted with because I've heard reports that Celeborn is supposed to be dead, and so that it's Celeborn, but at the same time he's holding that dagger. And Celeborn, so there's several different stories about the history of Celeborn and Galadriel, and how they met and where they came from and who Celeborn was, but none of them have Celeborn being on I believe Aman is the continent that would be the Undying Lands. He never gets there. Technically he gets there, but in one of the stories he's one of the Teleri, which means he's at the ships, but he's never part of the elves who are around the two trees, who have that imagery, who use that imagery so much. So it makes more sense for her brother to have that dagger than it would for Celeborn. So I don't know if that's what it's going to be. That it's whatever. Then he says, or the two showrunners or directors or whatever they're called, creators of the show, are talking about how from the beginning we knew that she couldn't do this alone. Every good quest needs a fellowship, is what they're implying, or was what they say, and then they imply that means we're going to have, by the end of the show, we're going to have Galadriel and Elrond and Arondir and possibly Bronwyn, possibly Theo, possibly these Hobbit, the Harfoots that should not be there because that doesn't make sense, probably Elendil, probably some of these other characters, and they're going to all come together into a fellowship for a quest, which does not make sense because that's not how this world worked at this time. First off, the Hobbits wouldn't have been there. The Hobbits can't be there because that directly contradicts canon, where it says, and yes, I know they've contradicted canon in several places, but the appendices specifically say that and it says they come in 1050 of the third age, which is quite a long time after the events of this, and so they would not have any major role in the second age at all. They shouldn't even be in the show, to be honest. So we'll see what happens with that. But if they include these hobbits or these Harfoots in the story that they're trying to tell in this fellowship, then it's gonna not make any sense whatsoever. But so the reason why I say that they're implying with this every quest needs a fellowship is that they're going to include all these different races of characters, is because the very next shots you see is of the Harfoots, of Eleanor and her friends and everything, and you see some orcs, and you see some you see the dwarf during the fourth, I believe, is who is breaking a rock. You see Ismael Cruz Cordoba, who is playing Arondir. He's talking a little bit about it, talking about the scope of the show being massive. And you see some Numenorians, and you see Theo with the sword, the black sword that's growing. Understand how that works, or what it is, or why that black sword. I don't understand. Is Theo going to be one of the Nazgul, one of the humans that gets one of the 9 rings or something? Like, I really don't understand the whole thing with Theo. But you see, yeah, more dwarf stuff, more orc stuff, then you see more elves, but it's in Gil-galad talking about Benjamin Walker, who plays Gil-galad, talking about how this is the time when when the characters and the races become who we know them to be in the third age, which kind of sort of, yeah, but not really, because there's still a lot of things that change and happen over the time. Even into the third age, Galadriel is not who we know her to be yet. It takes quite a while. It takes her some time of reflection and some sitting down and thinking and realizing, I need to protect this woodland realm. But also, Galadriel was never the leader of the woodland realm. That was Celeborn. I guess I shouldn't say the woodland realm, Lothlorien. The woodland realm usually refers to Mirkwood and Thranduil's kingdom. So Lothlorien, Galadriel, and Celeborn, they rule it jointly as king and queen, but they aren't really there yet. There's still some time and some things that have to happen in the second age before they arrive. This is from Unfinished Tales and the history of Galadriel and Celeborn, that portion of Unfinished Tales, where it tells their story and the various variations of the story, and most of them end up with, in this third age, Galadriel and Celeborn are not yet settled in Lothlorien. But then once they do settle, then they rule Lothlorien until the end of the third age, where, as we know, they all depart from the Undying Lands, or to the Undying Lands, excuse me. So just some, I don't know. Yes, I can understand this is where they're coming to be who we know them to be in later books, but it's barely the start of that journey for most of these characters. Elendil, of course, being a human, and Isildur being a human, a man, they change quite a bit faster. They become who we know them to be by the end of the show, obviously. That makes sense. But some of these other characters, Elrond, not really. Gil-galad, yeah, because Gil-galad dies in the last lines of Elves and Men. So there is some of that, yes, but there's also, it's not exactly completely true with the lore. There's really not a whole lot of new footage in this featurette either. There's one shot of Bronwyn swinging an axe or something. I don't know what it is, but there's one shot of that. There's another shot of orcs running that I don't think I've seen before. And then Cheeto Galadriel, as I've heard people call her, it's just Galadriel covered in ash. I think we've seen some of that though. And then there's Nazanin Nyadi, who plays Bronwyn, is talking about it's important to, let's see, what Tolkien represents is really important that we keep that legacy alive. And I agree, 100% agree with what she just said there. Unfortunately, I don't think that's really what they're doing with this show. And Renfail has talked a lot more about this, and I try not to go over all this stuff too much because I'm just talking about the released footage and stuff specifically released for the show in preparation for the show. Talking about my thoughts on that stuff. Morfydd Clark says in this show something can happen in a split second that changes everything, and yeah, that's how every show works. That's how storytelling works. Like, yeah, obviously. It's meant to sound impressive, powerful, and like this show is interesting and lots of stuff going on, but that's doesn't really change the fact that that's how storytelling works. Any event in a story can change the course of the story going forward, and that's how it should. She says it's dangerous and shocking, and then it cuts to the image of her swimming away from the sea monster that's diving over the broken ship. And cool imagery, yeah, and I want to know what the sea monster is because I love sea monsters, but this event of Galadriel being on a boat and there being a sea monster around, like what is this event? Because that makes no sense to me at all. But that's mostly the end of the footage. There's not a whole lot left. Anyways, I don't really have a ton of new thoughts or anything to talk about with this one. I wanted to point out that there is a featurette. I'll have a link down in the description down below so that you guys can go watch it for yourselves. But it's has me, I don't know, I'm not particularly impressed with anything that I see in this, but it does feel a little bit like they're trying to backpedal and do some damage control based on what I've seen from some of the other things that people are saying, that the creators of the show and the actors and stuff that are saying about the show that really, quite frankly, turns people off to wanting to watch this show. And so it seems like they're doing a little bit of damage control, or trying to do some damage control and turn back, get people excited about this show again, because they haven't really done anything to do so yet. And so that's why they're saying things like, we need to respect Tolkien, and what was that phrase? What Tolkien represents is really important, that we keep that legacy alive. And we felt that this was the story that deserved to be told, talking about the story of the Second Age. And so, like, there's some things that I agree with what they're saying, and if that's truly the mindset that they had going into this show, let's preserve this, make the changes that we have to make a compelling show, but then still stay as true to Tolkien as we possibly can. If that's what they're doing, then that's going to be great. This show is going to not fail in that aspect and not be horrible. But I don't think that's what they're doing. I think they're just playing damage control at this point. Anyways, just some brief thoughts. Hopefully this video isn't too terribly long. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday, occasionally on Wednesdays if I've got some adaptation stuff to talk about. We will see you guys again soon. Thanks for watching. Stay warm.